Welcome back to the Act Two podcast, a podcast for the real-life working screenwriter. I'm Tasha Hugh.
And I am Josh Hallman.
And we have a guest today, so who cares about introductions? Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Michael Basha. I'm a dear friend of Mr. Josh here. Excited to be here. Very honored to be here, actually.
You know what? Let me go, because Basha's not going to do justice here.
Sure.
First of all, I've known Basha for a few years. He's a fantastic writer. He's clinical with notes. He's opinionated. He's one of the best tennis players I know.
Wow, that's saying a lot from Josh. That's impressive.
Josh is a very good tennis player himself. If people are unaware of that, he's a very, very talented athlete.
So Tasha, just yesterday I was playing a match,
Yeah.
and I was playing against this guy, and I completely missed a shot, like in a really bad way, leaning off my back foot, all the problems. And I just look over to my left, and who do I see there, just standing with their arms crossed, just staring at me in judgment? Michael Basha.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what you did.
Yeah. I wanted to get in there so bad.
Anyway, we've been circling Basha for quite some time. He and I have a million conversations all the time about our topic today with sports and entertainment and screenwriting and being an athlete and all the things.
People may be confused. Why the hell? Like, we're going to be talking about this topic today, and I just want to be super clear. Josh and I'm going to say Josh is a current athlete. I grew up playing sports all the way through college. I grew up soccer, softball, competitive horseback riding, all the things. I even played tennis casually. It's the only sport that pisses me off. I will be completely honest.
Same.
If I do poorly in another sport, I'm like, I shake it off. It's fine. Tennis, absolutely not. When I worked at Universal, I played softball there. And that's all to say that Josh and I always send each other various speeches from professional athletes and coaches and quotes from professional athletes, because they always really hit home, and we always think, God, this reminds me of writing. This reminds me of the career of a screenwriter. So the psychology of a professional athlete and the work ethic, to us anyways, really mirrors professional screenwriting so much. And that may sound ridiculous, but we're having you on to corroborate this feeling for us. So that is why Basha is here.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, I'm happy to corroborate because I have the same feeling. So
Amazing.
yeah, very, very interested to get into it.
Everyone, when they come on, the very first thing is we want to know how the hell you even got into this industry.
Yeah, it was a very unique way in. As mentioned with the sports thing, tennis was my life for the longest time. I started taking it very seriously when I was about 13 or 14, which what that looked like for me was like, training every day, going to tournaments 3, sometimes 4 weekends a month. And that sometimes meant traveling all over America to do that, playing at the national level, the USTA tournaments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That ultimately spawned into a scholarship for a Division I tennis program. And, but when I got about 2 years into college, the advisors sort of looked at me and said, well, you're kind of going nowhere fast with your education because you're just kind of taking classes, and there's no real direction here. And so I ended up deciding to get into philosophy, big mistake, and doing some creative writing. Philosophy I ended up really enjoying. Creative writing, I found that I had a bit of a natural talent for it. After a very short time, I was able to become published as both a poet and short story writer. So that was great. And then I left undergrad, went to go work at this advertising agency, which was cool because at the time they had the Wilson account. I don't know if you guys remember those Wilson ads where Roger Federer, it was for rackets.
Oh,
Roger
yeah,
Federer
yeah,
would
yeah.
go like, how does it feel? And they would sit them down on like this therapist couch. But I went to go work there. The guy who owned the company was a big tennis guy, and it was just not for me. It's a different world, and I just felt like it was a creative thing, but not really that great. And then I left and went back to coaching tennis, and then just decided I kind of like movies and made a couple, applied to USC, got in, and that's how I wound up at graduate film school. And then there I was I specialized mostly in directing and cinematography. Writing was not a well, it wasn't a focus of mine at USC. That was something I came to actually much later. So then I graduated, wound up here. I sort of got into writing a lot more when I realized as I was graduating that if someone had $1 million or whatever to make a movie, I just didn't have anything to make. I had nothing written. And I just figured I needed to get on it and start writing.
Yeah, I also forgot to mention he's a great director as well. He's a writer-director.
Thank you.
Can I ask then, after you graduated
Mm-hmm.
college and you had your MFA in
Yeah.
what is it? Directing?
Well, at USC, it's like they describe it as like film and television
Okay.
production. So it's
Yeah,
like a broad
I assumed it was something much fancier
kind of
than that. Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Then what was your next step? I know USC usually has a lot of connections of people actively working in the industry. Is that the path that you took, or were you just thrown into the pool? And
I'll be honest, USC does not do a great job of fostering those connections,
that's shocking.
they're very it boasts having this big network, and it does have a big network, but there's not really a lot of opportunity there. They have a program in which they try to set you up with someone, and they had set me up with someone, and they did the obligatory, like, they follow up with you, but very rarely in these situations does their mentorship program pan out to something. So I was basically kind of thrown to the wolves, and I kind of didn't really have a lot of direction, because while you're at film school, you might get a lot of education in some of the technical aspects, but what you don't understand is like how to get an agent, how to get a manager, how to kind of navigate, like how to actually, because you get out there, and I didn't realize that like you couldn't just like send scripts to companies, you just couldn't do that. And I had no idea about that. And, so it was very, very difficult. The way I kind of managed it was, writing contests. I had a script that made like the semifinals at the Nickel, which I then tried to parlay into management. And the way I actually found my manager was very happenstance. I just had a friend who knew a manager who was looking for clients, and he was really new to it. And we just kind of, it's been a great partnership since, but it was not querying, I must have queried 200-300 times and just had nothing.
Wow. Yeah.
It's nuts. We talk about this all the time. Is like it's almost like a crash course. No matter where you go to school, if you're at UCLA, USC, you think you still know the industry, but you still have to enter the industry, get the crash course of the industry, and then okay, so you're out of school, you hook up with your manager.
Yeah.
What were you doing for money?
I was teaching tennis. Yeah, I had graduated. I graduated USC. I had like less than $1,000 because I like paid for it all with loans, and I had graduated with like less than like I think I had like $500 in my bank account. I had like nothing, and I was like I got a job at Westwood Tennis Center, and I was like literally Ubering to and from the tennis center, and I wasn't even coaching on court. Right, I was in the pro shop, like selling Gatorades and signing people in. I would spend the exact same amount of money in the Ubers because I didn't have a car as what I was making that day to work. So it was like a very rough time.
Yeah. And you were doing that because you knew what you wanted to do now. You knew you wanted to write and direct, and this was just what you had to do to get to that point.
Yeah, I just needed to stay afloat. I needed to just sort of understand. I understood then that I needed to kind of like find my way, and that it was just going to be like a long process. And of course, they're not handing out movies to everybody and their brother. So it's like I just needed to find a way to stick around, because I knew from tennis, and this is the sports aspect, if I could just persevere, sort of keep my nose down, that I just had to do the work and then I could get it. But that it would be very exciting. There's a lot of people from USC went to school with who are no longer in film anymore because they gave it a year or two. It was just like too difficult. They couldn't afford it or whatever, and they just were like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yep.
Were you meeting a lot of people in the industry while you were there?
No.
Oh, really?
At USC, you mean?
No, at the tennis center.
Oh, no, not really at all. No. Not certainly at Westwood. Like at Palisades, there were like some actors, because it was a bit of a ritzier kind of place when I was working there. There was some, but not really. I didn't meet really any industry. And I also felt very, I guess this is my own problem, but I also felt very like, I didn't want to be that guy who's like, hey, do you want to read my screenplay? You know what I mean? Like I just had too much, I think, like social anxiety to to do that kind of thing. You know, I developed some really great relationships with people in the industry through tennis, but it was always, if my filmmaking stuff came up, it was always like very later, once I had like felt that they saw me as like a normal person, you know?
I fully understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then 2 years ago, as a matter of fact, I knew you at this time, and I'm looking through the list of scripts on the blacklist, and I see Sang Freud. Is that
Yeah.
the proper okay.
Sang-froid, yeah.
Oh, geez. Okay. Listen, dude, I'm from
That's
Wisconsin.
French, Josh.
And so my bad.
Well, the problem is that in Wisconsin, they pronounce all the French stuff funny, like Eau Claire and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Pump the brakes, Basha. But then I saw you had a script on the blacklist.
Yeah.
And then I'm always curious of blacklist stories.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, it was like I had sort of hooked up with my manager, and we had spent some time sort of getting to know each other, developing this stuff. And I had this idea that had been sitting around. You know, personally, I thought it was stupid. To give, I guess, some context, the script was written about, it's basically like a vampire heist film about these vampires who rob a hospital of blood, which
That's amazing.
on paper to me sounded so stupid.
I mean, what's the tone? That sounds like that could be great.
Just really, really, really dumb. But I thought that the idea for the script was quite stupid, right? But my manager was like very encouraging to be like, I really think you should write it. You know, I was like, it's not really my thing. I don't really do these kind of like broad, high concept movies. It's just kind of not my lane. And he was like, just write it. He's like, it's going to be you no matter what. Just do it. So I wrote it, and I thought like, okay, it's not bad. But one thing that my manager is really good, and I think this is a really good point when I've thought about this a lot in terms of like management and thinking about your team, was what I love about my manager, shout out Matt Rosen, is that he compliments me in skills that I don't have, which is that he's a very good cheerleader. And I think he was really instrumental. So once we had the script, we actually got producers attached before the script had gotten on the blacklist. And I think we had sort of been building sort of some hype that way, was just getting it out there. And I think it was the strength of the concept, and my manager, who's a really great people person, a really great interfacer between producers and execs and things like that. It was really able to cheerlead on my behalf, which is something I wouldn't have done probably for me, because I thought it was just silly. I thought it was just a silly idea.
All right, so you wrote this script that you didn't really believe in. Your manager was like, trust me, this is a really great concept. And he started really sending it out to like, to just kind of get you on in meetings? Or was he like, this is going to be a blacklist script, we have a plan?
He was initially sending it out on meetings, and I think he came back and was like, the reception is really, really good on this. I think we could make a push for this for the blacklist. And I was like, I didn't really understand what the blacklist was. I didn't really get it. I saw we had gotten on, much to my surprise. And then not only that, it was like in the top like 5 or 6 or 7 in terms of votes. Like it had gotten a ton of votes. It didn't like scrape by in. It was like, it had like over like 20 votes for the list. And so we were like, oh, we had no idea. And then I was mortified because the draft that was going around was like a first draft. And I was like, this is terrible. I was like, people are going to see this, and it's awful. And it's so much better now. But you know, that was what it was, you know?
Has it sunk in what a huge achievement it is to be on the blacklist now?
Totally.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I didn't really understand it, because I think I was just so focused on trying to, and this is like the sports mentality. I think I was just sort of so focused on trying to keep my head down, not kind of be, you know, achievement or accolade driven, trying to just think about like, you know, not, again, like as we say in like sports training, like not being results driven, just trying to be like focused on process. And I think I was just focused on, okay, can I execute this thing that's not necessarily in what I would consider my strike zone, a high concept, you know, genre film like this. And so, yeah, like looking back on it now, I was like, okay, well, I'm pretty proud of that. I was able to kind of execute this thing that I was really kind of uncertain about every step of the way.
I really, really want to get into the actual topic of this, but I have one more follow-up question
Please.
about this writer stuff. Were you now stuck? Because people had read your script and was like, oh, vampire heist, this is his thing. Were you now stuck with, either taking meetings with companies who did this and you were like, actually, surprise, I do small dramas. I actually don't know what your genre is. But like, did you have to explain to people that's actually not my brand? Or are you now stuck doing these bigger high concept things?
It's a great question. I actually didn't have that problem. And I think this goes to my manager's credit of understanding that even though you're doing something that is maybe a little bit outside of your strike zone, that there will be still so much of you in it. What I describe people, if anybody who's read Sang-Froid, it's the least vampire movie ever. And that's the way I would describe it. No one gets bitten. It's basically like Michael Mann's Thief meets Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon. It's like a character-driven, gritty, 70s-esque New Hollywood like thriller. So I think when people read it, I think that they saw that like it wasn't really genre-driven. And so it wasn't suddenly like, okay, we need you to like look at this horror thing or look at this, this thing. It was very much like, oh, this is like really character-driven, ticking clock. And so I think they saw a lot of that. And like I said, to my manager's credit, that was his point, which is like, there's still going to be you in there. If you could just execute this thing in your way, you'll kind of be able to have your cake and eat it too.
That sounds like an amazing manager. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, Josh, take us in.
Okay, so like Tasha said early on, we exchange a lot of messages about sports all the time. And I'm convinced, we're all convinced here, and I think it's undeniable. I truly believe that there is a huge correlation between the way you approach sports and the way you approach screenwriting, and I'm going to say the entertainment industry as a whole. So I guess let's just talk about that. Do you see correlations, and have you found some in your screenwriting life?
I'll start with saying what was the kind of biggest shock for me coming into the industry. And I don't want this to come off as like sounding super cynical. It's not. But I think one thing that was a big shock for me coming into the industry from a sports background was typically in sports, when you go, let's say in tennis, you go to play a match, the better person usually wins that day. I would say in this industry, that's not necessarily always the case, right? There's a lot more factors that necessarily come in. Of course, I think cream does rise to the top, but like it does not necessarily always mean that. And so I think the biggest culture shock for me was this idea that like just because I worked hard and just because I put the time in did not necessarily mean that it was going to result in a victory, that there was still like a level of performance there that had kind of I was not really prepared for coming in as an athlete, but what I will say is that I think the right mode of thinking was keep the head down, focus on execution of the things that you're working on rather than these like accolades, results driven kind of things. But what I would say what was most unique about tennis, and I think that helps within the industry, is because as all of us know, you will spend most of your life hearing the word no just on repeat over and over and over again. And what is the most common way for people to call a ball out in tennis? It's usually no, right? And when you think about tennis is a game of errors, right? If you're watching a tennis match, you ever watch a tennis match you watch on TV, sometimes at the end they will show a bunch of stats. The most important stat to look at is always the unforced errors stat. You will inevitably make them. And you inevitably make a lot of mistakes. And my tennis coach always told me was just things about like having a really short memory to kind of get through these things. And I think as an athlete, you're going to take your lumps, you're going to take your losses, but of course it means that like you power through. And like I said, a lot of my classmates who are no longer in the industry maybe didn't have the mindset of, again, I don't want to speculate, but I think they're also, from some of the people I spoke to, there was this mindset of like, I heard no too many times. And it's like, I think as an athlete, the question I would ask is, if you're really serious about your sport, getting better in your sport, how many times do you have to lose before you give up? You know what I mean? I think any serious athlete would say, well, I would never do that, right? I would just keep going, but I think that's where the athlete's mindset can kind of really come in and help.
It's interesting you say that, because I really do think there's a benefit to having this mindset of like, I'm just never going to stop. Like, I'm going to keep coming back like Michael Myers. It's like almost an addiction to keep coming back over and over after failures or rejections, because you feel the highs in there for just a little bit, and then it's so low and you're like, no, I'm getting back to the high. But
It reminds me too of like my favorite baseball players, right? They'll have a bad, like let's say they're a pitcher, they have a bad inning. They come back to the dugout, and some will throw a fit, right? They'll throw their gloves, they'll kick baseball bats everywhere, and no one will want to talk to them. But my favorite ones are the ones you see sitting down with an iPad, reviewing every single pitch that they just did so that they know what they did wrong so they can go and be better the next time. They're putting in the work in between the failure and letting it drive them rather than letting them either affect the next shot, right? Like as in a golf term, or I guess letting them regress. They're using it to improve. They're using failure to improve. And I think that's where definitely in screenwriting I see that come in, and definitely something I have to battle every time there is a failure, because it's easy to be like, well, I'm just a bad player, or I'm just not as good as the person across from me, instead of being like, well, let me like pull up my bootstraps and try to figure out how I can be better the next time.
Absolutely.
I'm convinced your personality on a tennis court is exactly what it is when it comes to how you like rebound with a script.
100%. Well, tennis is the most psychological sport. This is why I love tennis so much. It's the most psychological sport. You know, you don't have a team you can hide behind. There's no coach there who can kind of coach you through. So a lot of my job as a tennis coach is not just as like a coach per se, but also as like a psychologist, because each person brings their own unique things. And when I watch someone play, I can always tell exactly what kind of person they are just by watching 5-10 minutes of them play a match, because it has nowhere for it to go, right? It can't be kind of diffused amongst these various entities that you would find on a team. You know, you can't be subbed out of a tennis match. You just have to endure it. And so like if you're suffering, I will see you suffer horribly. You know what I mean? And it can be like difficult and humiliating, but it's the only way, like as a coach, I know it's the only way for me to help you is to see that. And so there's like a certain sense of like being able to embrace that stuff instead of hide it, you know, to kind of come to terms with it in a way.
And then who are the most successful, when you say you can like see the person on the court, who do you feel like is the most successful personality?
Well, I would say, you know, Novak Djokovic gave a really great interview recently talking about this. And I think it was really insightful. And he said that he was really down on this idea of athletes or people who compete being those who only experience positive emotions. And I think that this is like a very wrong way to think about it. Djokovic's point was that like it's okay to feel anger and sadness and despair and like your world is crashing down. It's better to kind of acknowledge those feelings and to kind of, you know, be able to live with them and be able to, you know, it's like what they say is like courage is not the absence of fear, right? It's like doing it in spite of it. So I think it's the same kind of mentality of you have to be able, the ones who I think are the most successful are the ones who are not that they never get angry. They're able to get angry and then understand that anger, understand where it needs to go. And I think like as a writer, as a creative, like you're going to feel the rejection, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to have failure, you're going to get angry, you're going to feel that despair. So it's like, okay, I need to not just like pretend I don't have it, understand what that is, let it inform me on some psychological level, and then push forward through that.
Have you seen that all good athletes are also good creatives?
I do. And you know, this was an old saying that like Werner Herzog had about Buster Keaton being like the great athlete of cinema, not just as like an actor, but also as a creative. That I think, you know, and I think it's very sad because I think a lot of times athletics and creative seem to be like very different worlds. People almost describe them as two different sides of the brain. And I remember I had some difficulties adjusting in film school because of this, and I think that I had learned during my time there that people had a certain feeling about me because I was an athlete, that it came with like this stigma. You know, I think people thought I acted a certain way, behaved a certain way. And I was just like, well, this is just what I do. I'm not cocky. I'm not arrogant. But what my coach always used to tell me was, if you don't step out on the court believing that you can win that match, don't step out on the court. So I would never go into a meeting with an executive, producer and actor and not be like, I'm going to make the greatest movie you've ever seen. You know, I'm writing one of the best scripts ever. It's not like some like stupid confidence. It's like, if I didn't fully believe that and have that belief in myself, then I can't, I'm wasting their time to step out on that court. You have to believe that you're going to win the match. You have to believe that you're going to make a great movie, that you're going to write a great script. If you didn't, don't start, don't do it. You know, you have to believe that.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point because there is a level of confidence you need when you go into these interviews, like anywhere when you're talking to somebody, but you don't want to come off as the most arrogant human being ever. But at the same time, you kind of have to be in your own mind.
Right. These are people who get hundreds of submissions and people coming to them all the time about various different things. If you're kind of like sheepishly going like, well, I think it's pretty good. It's like, I don't know that I have the confidence to give you, $5 million to make that movie. I want, at least in my mind, I would want someone who's like, and I think what's helped me and like what I've discovered in these meetings is I think I do very well in generals or meeting actors and things like that because I think that they respond to see that like I have a vision. Even if I don't have all the answers, I at least give off the feeling like I can find the answer very, very quickly.
It reminds me of Tasha pitching, who's one of the best pitchers I know. Just sheer confidence of what the story is. And like, that's it.
But I do struggle with the meetings that you're talking about. Like I've grown a lot in terms of how I present myself in generals because my confidence has grown. Or when even if I do pitch the hell out of something because I do have confidence in pitches because it's something I've practiced enough. But if I get the job, I do think I still come at it with like, well, in my head, I think of all the ways, not that I'll fail, but all the ways that I know I'll struggle through to get to, I know I will kill it. I know eventually I will get you a draft that will be amazing, but you're probably not going to have the same patience I'm going to have. And I'm going to know that I'm going to fuck up along the way, but I know that I'll get there. And so I think that insecure, it's not even insecure. It's just like, I know the process and it's dirty to get to the good thing. I feel like I take that in as, I feel like I come at it with a lack of confidence because of that. So as an athlete, as a coach, how do you coach someone who has that going in of like, oh, like if it's tennis, it's like, I know my backhand is really weak and I know I'm going to have to face that in this match. How do I not get that in my head at the start?
Well, I think in tennis, it's really the best way to describe it is, one of the best strategies you have, and I was talking about with Josh the other day, actually, was about the ability to impose your will upon the situation, right? So understanding what are your strengths. Like, let's say, give an example, like Roger Federer, great player, one of the GOATs. One of his weaknesses historically was his backhand. So we'll talk about like that from that aspect. Now, what did Federer do? Well, he had a great slice backhand that could neutralize, but he also had this incredible forehand and unbelievable footwork that could run around his backhand and take more forehands. I think it's very easy to try to think of ourselves or want to have this illusion. It's not always an illusion, but sometimes have this illusion that we're like very complete, that we could handle comedy as well as we could handle action as well as we could handle this. And it's like to be able to understand like what you do well as a player. Again, what is your identity as a writer, as an athlete, as a player in that sport? And then how can you make that exceptionally good? Not that you won't shore up your weaknesses, but that your strengths will be so valuable that the weaknesses won't matter.
I love that. I love that. Like I can feel that that's just a switch you need to flip in terms of like the weakness still exists, but that's no longer like the forward thinking thing. The thing is like, oh, I'm really good at notes and revisions and I know I can get there. Like that's the strength. That's not the weakness I'm putting front. And so I get that it's like you really do have to like train your brain differently.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's, one of the unique things of tennis that you will see if you see some of these like really long matches. You'll see matches where the person who wins the match will win less points than the person who lost the match. And that's a crazy phenomena in tennis. There's not many sports, if any sports, where you can win less points and still win the match, which is a testament to like the mental ability of like even understanding like I lost more points. I still won. How did I do that? Right? There's a real, tact in understanding how that can function. Right? How you can take more lumps than accolades and still come out on top.
All right. So let's talk about strategizing a little bit, because I know you have a theory on this, how strategizing in tennis is similar to constructing a script.
Yeah.
A good script.
A good script. So there's obviously very famous quote by Howard Hawks, right? Like a movie is 3 good scenes and no bad ones, right? I believe that this is similar to like the way in which you can construct a tennis point, but also how you can conceive and how I've thought about conceiving of scripts as I write them. One of the most sort of pivotal moments for me was in my final match of my college career. My coach came up to me and he told me about something called, now see, historically I was always someone who was, so actually it's funny enough, ironically, my nickname growing up as a tennis player was Hollywood. And the reason it was Hollywood was because I was prone to hitting very flashy, stupid shots. I wanted the glitz and the glamour. I wanted to hit the highlight reels.
You still do that. What are you talking about?
I still do that.
Yeah.
I still do that. But,
Yeah.
one of the things that allowed me to grow as an athlete was this coach who gave me this sort of 90-10 rule, which is this idea of that 90% of your shots have to be basic and boring and kind of run of the mill. And that 10% of your shots have to be spectacular. If you think about it that way, then the pressure kind of goes off of you of trying to hit something really great all the time, which then causes lots of mistakes. So when conceiving of a script, one of the things that I'll run into when I read a lot, or like I see a lot of some movies, is that people are often trying to make every scene an absolute banger. The scene has to be unbelievable. They're putting so much into that scene, and it just doesn't work, right? It's too big. It doesn't fit within the context of the story. There's too much too soon. And so my theory of strategizing for writing and greater for tennis is largely that you have to be willing to be boring sometimes, basic. And what do I mean by that? Is that sometimes you just need a scene where some exposition is told from one character to another. Now, you can find a way to make that exposition a little sexier, a little more fun, and that's fine. You should. But what you shouldn't do is pretend that, like I said, I used to do things when I was younger in writing where I would be like, we don't need the exposition. And I wouldn't write the scene. And then people would read the script and they go, I don't know what's happening. I don't understand it. Right. I don't know, And I'm like, well, I sort of subtly put it in. It's like, well, it's so subtle. I don't get it. So I'd have to go back to the drawing board. Right. It's the same thing, even like with directing, I think one of the best examples being, this is where I'll do my, Josh knows me for this, but like a film I'm not like a big fan of, even though I am a fan of him as a director, is like a film like Magnolia.
Oh, God, here we go.
Here we go, right? Here we go. But my thing is that, like, even though PTA is an incredible writer and director, one of the issues of Magnolia is that every shot, every moment is treated with such bigness, these like really elaborate things and everything, that it makes the whole thing feel flat because it doesn't build towards something. And I think in a lot of ways, like when you're thinking of conceiving a script or a story, you have to be willing to be, as Howard Hawks says, 3 good scenes and no bad ones. And the no bad ones just means that like that's your basic run of the mill character has to go from A to B to C, right? And then you'll have like your 3 big scenes, maybe like end of Act 1, end of Act 2, whatever. But that's sort of my general theory, is that like, tennis, a good tennis player is, a good tennis match is built on simple, basic cross-court forehands. Right? And your ability to hit a really good cross-court forehand is probably what makes you a really good player. Now, what that means is like, it would be really cool. And this is, I'll give PTA credit here. He said in a really great interview, you might really want there to be a car chase in your movie, but if it doesn't make sense, you can't put it in, right? You might really want to go down the line and rip a winner with your forehand, but if it doesn't make sense, you're going to have to go back cross-court. And so the ability to be really good at the simple things, and when I say boring, I don't mean like the scene itself should be boring, but your ability to be really good at disseminating exposition is what will make you an excellent screenwriter, not the ability to like avoid these kind of like things we don't like, right? De Palma was great at this. Anytime there's a scene of exposition in a De Palma film, he's always doing something insane with the camera just to make sure that you kind of...
You're having fun while
you're having fun, right? So
fed,
it's the ability to be exceptional at very basic things, even the things that aren't going to necessarily win you the point, that will accumulate over time to get you to where you need to be.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with this. And that's a really interesting way of sort of like accessing that idea. For me, when I think of, the shows that I've made and the movies that I write, there has to be, similar with music, right? You can't just constantly be building, because then you can't feel the build. It's just always up. You have to be slow so that the heroic build, you actually feel that. So it's the same with scenes, right? Like your scenes can't always be like high octane or whatever that equivalent is in your genre. Yeah, you do have to have a build into it so that that heroic moment or that emotional thing that's happening or that really exciting car chase feels like a big moment in your movie. I think that's a really great way of looking at it. And we've talked about on the podcast before about looking at your film and TV pilots and your shows as like having a rhythm to it. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, right? Like your scenes have to have a rhythm. They can't be at the same rhythm. And there's something I'm working on right now with someone who is doing a lot of what you're talking about. They're cramming every scene with like world shit. And we got like all the characters in here. And it's great because they want to put all the characters in their pilot so you see all the characters, but it's also they've lost the thread of what the audience is going to be looking at and caring about in a scene because everything is so big. So I love the way that you're accessing it in a sports term. That makes a lot of sense to me. That's really cool.
And that's what I mean by like, I think 90-10. It's like 90% of the stuff that you're going to do is just has to kind of serve the purpose for you to get there. That's why like I think dramas are so hard to write, like just straight drama, because I think it's very easy. A lot of those films can have lots of scenes that might feel or come off as like boring, and they're not. You just need to kind of do it. But like if every scene is like really intense melodrama, characters screaming at one another, then you're right, you'll emotionally wear out your audience.
Yeah.
You know, so it can happen across any genre, not just like action where you have the high octane stuff, but like what is the high octane stuff, as you say, of your genre? If it's a drama, you can have people screaming and people like all sorts of social issues, like, you know what I mean? Like infidelity, like in every scene, or like something, because it's like, it's too much. You have to kind of build towards, you know, a real emotional catharsis. And that may mean like one climax.
Yeah. And also because you're a director, you're familiar with this of giving actors something to do in the scene so that it disguises the fact that I'm expositing to you right now. And I've done that a lot in my shows where it's like, we need this exposition in this moment, in this scene, at this minute in the episode. But God, it's boring. So even though the dialogue is fun, like what can they be doing? Even if it's just like a walk and talk so that the audience has something to look at in the background, like give them something to do. Because yeah, you're right. Even though it's a low, it doesn't have to be a boring scene of just two people talking. Make it fun and interesting. That's part of your job as a writer.
I want to talk about self-talk.
Me too.
Oh, good. Okay, cool.
And how that plays out in sports, plays out in tennis, and plays out in screenwriting and the entertainment industry. And just, this is the most obvious one-to-one of, if you're in a sport and you're playing something like, I suck, you're golfing, you're playing tennis, you're pickleball, you're baseball, whatever it is, you freeze, you believe it, you all of a sudden suck. Screenwriting, you just give up on a script. You're like, I suck, I'm done. And then you just don't write for like 6 months. And then before you know it, you kind of gain that confidence again. Or you can talk yourself out of a career in general. I just want to touch on this. Is that a one-to-one for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that the important thing is not to like get into this trap of like the only emotion I can express is this positive emotion. I think that's a trap, because I think you'll ultimately, there's maybe some people who can operate like that. I'm definitely not one of them, and I don't know many who are, but I think that you can fall into this trap of like deluding yourself. And I think it's okay to be angry, and it's okay to be like frustrated, and it's okay to be like, I suck, because maybe that did suck. The thing you did suck, and you have to like embrace that. The trick is it's not to go then, like, as you say, just to like talk yourself out of something, to be like, there's nothing here in this script, there's nothing here for me as a screenwriter, but to get into this space of like, okay, I understand that I have made this error, I've gotten broken, I've lost this game, I've lost the set. But I think in your resilience, Josh, I think this is where it's like, it shows that like understanding where my strength is, that I'm a good athlete. And so even though I've lost this first set, I'm confident going into the second and the third that I can at least outlast this guy. And so like that's where the self-talk I think comes in, is like understanding. That's what I mean. Like it's a kind of about really coming to terms with who you are. What do you do well? You know, what are your strengths? Do you write great dialogue? Okay, well, like, you know, lean into that. The self-talk is big, but I think more importantly I think to master it, you have to really master who you are. And I think that takes a lot of self-reflection, of understanding what you do well, where you thrive, where you know your deficiencies are, and then how you can kind of develop a strategy to how to approach every project, your career, that kind of thing, because that will influence how you go into these meetings, how you talk to people, how you pitch your projects.
So when, like in your example of I've just lost my first match, what is the self-talk that happens as an athlete to get into the second one to make sure that you're still bringing your A game and still in the right headspace so that you can continue to win after losing so poorly in the first one?
The first thing you have to do is, like, as you say, like with baseball, you have to sort of like be able to like review the game plan really quickly. What might have succeeded, what didn't succeed, and then going to a place where it's like, okay, understanding that that was not the performance I wanted, but then being able to, again, sort of focus on the things that you can control, right? It's like, I can't control how someone's going to react when they read my script, right? And that's a tough thing for people to get over, right? Because you might put everything into this thing and it just doesn't vibe with. Like I had a spec I went out with recently where it was about a certain subject that involved children, and the guy was like, I had just had a kid, I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. And it's like, that can be like at first thought, your first thought is like, man, like you want to grab that guy by the neck and just be like, what is wrong with you? You know what I mean? That's your first reaction, right? Because you're like, get over yourself. But then you have to be like, okay, hold on, I get it, it's an emotional, difficult thing. So it's just understanding, like, I couldn't control that. But what I can do is I can control, like, how hard I work. In the tennis term, like, how well am I moving my feet? How well am I staying focused? How well am I executing my game plan?
You're really talking about focusing with the self-talk to say to yourself, my footwork is great right now. I'm going to, if you're losing a match, you kind of find the things that are working. My footwork is great. I'm trying as hard as I can. I'm doing my game plan, as opposed to, I suck, I'm losing.
Yeah.
This is terrible.
Well, what about if your footwork did suck in your first match? And so what you're talking about is sort of this golden, to me, like this pie in the sky, like I wish I could be like that, where it's like you played sucky in your first match, your footwork was terrible, you're just like, you were, I don't know, tennis things, you were swinging poorly, but like objectively outside of that first match, your footwork's actually really great and you work on it really hard, so obviously that's good, but it was bad then. So as a writer, what I do when my footwork is bad in my previous meeting or the previous script that I sent in, I go, oh God, my footwork is just bad. And all the other stuff, that was fucking lucky. Or I start telling myself stories about how actually the bad footwork is the reality and not the good footwork. And as an athlete, you obviously can't do that. That completely gets in your head and you fail completely. So can you talk about like any tricks that you've learned, things from coaches or things that you yourself coach to help people who, especially kids, I'm sure, who are very emotional, like get over that feeling and sort of push through to a better self?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. So there's a situation in which you're absolutely right, where like the footwork, there might be a reality in which, like, even if you do have good footwork, let's say like you're feeling sluggish that day, and the reality may be that the footwork just isn't there. So again, this is where it becomes about, how can I reformulate the strategy, right? What can I do? What are things that I can do that maybe don't involve the quality of the footwork? Could I serve a little better to get more free points? Where are the things that where are the things that I can control, right? And that, I think that's the biggest thing, is I think where you see it a lot in kids, where the emotion rides in, is that they tend to get upset over the thing. I'll say, I'm just not hitting very well. And I will say, it's not about hitting well. Like, hitting well is a result of many processes, right? You don't just like swing well, right? It just doesn't. There's very few people who can do that. There's very few people who are blessed with great ball striking ability. So it becomes about, well, how are your feet moving well? Are you preparing early enough? Are you doing the right technical things, right? There's like a whole checklist. And so what I would tell people is, like, if you find yourself in that struggling, go back through the most basic checklist. Okay, I'm just not doing this scene great. Okay, well, go back like to the most basic level. Like, where's your conflict in the scene? What does each character want in the scene? Like, even though that might feel like really rudimentary and almost like insulting in a sense of like, oh, I have to go back to like this very elementary stuff. It's like, no. That would be my checklist for an athlete. The same thing. Get back to start at the bottom and build your way up, because hitting the ball well just doesn't just happen. You have to put all of these, what we call everything, into a kinetic chain, right? And what is your kinetic chain for writing? How does it start? What's the building blocks to get you to there? And sometimes you just have to go back and start at the most basic level.
It's such a good reminder, because I think as writers, we do this the same way as people do with athletes, I think, is you just assume that Tony Gilroy is just a genius. And maybe he is. There's 1%. But maybe, honestly, maybe there isn't. Shohei Ohtani, the greatest athlete on the planet right now. You just look at him and you're like, well, he has natural talent. Of course he has natural talent. But also, what does every single person who's ever worked with him say? His work ethic is beyond anything they've ever seen for any other athlete. That's why he's the top 1%. So yeah, he's gifted, but there's also this work ethic behind it. And presumably people in our industry, that's the same as well. So I think partly when this happens to me anyways, of, do a bad scene or someone gives me terrible notes on something, I think, well, another writer would have done better because I'm just a bad writer and other writers are better than me. Instead of being like, no, it takes hard work for this, of course you're going to get notes. It takes hard work for a script to be good. And as long as the work ethic is there behind it and you're continually building your skills, you'll be fine. So this to me is all the self-talk, but also, the way you sort of misjudge really good athletes, it feels very similar to me as well in screenwriting.
I mean, Otani's still going to strike out. You know what I mean? He's still going to make mistakes. He's still going to make errors. It's still going to happen. It's just again, the thing you can control, and this is what I mean. It's all about what you can control, is that what he can control is that he's going to work harder or his hardest. That's all he can control. He can't control how well a pitcher is going to throw at him. Right? He just can't. He doesn't know what they're going to throw, and he doesn't know how well they're going to throw it. He can't control that. All he can control is that, did he spend the hours in the batting box looking at tape, taking swings, listening to his coaches, trying to improve? That's all he can control. At the end of the day, if someone throws, 7 great pitches and strikes him out, all you can do is just walk off. That's why that's why I always tell people the best thing you can do is when someone hits a great shot on you in tennis, even if you don't mean it, is just say, good shot.
I can't imagine Josh saying that.
Do it again. Do it again. You know what I mean? You can have an attitude, do it again, but you just say good shot, because it's just you have to sort of remind yourself that sometimes there's just nothing you can do.
Yeah, that's great.
I know we could talk for 5 hours, but we also have
really
to wrap
could.
up. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to say one last thing.
Please.
Just to anyone who's an athlete and who's a screenwriter, whether you play any sport, whether it's e-games, I would challenge you to look at your reaction to when you play a sport to when you are in the entertainment world, and how you deal with the adversity and the ups and the downs, because I know there's a correlation in just the time you spend in doing something, exactly what you guys were just talking about. It's just a beautiful thing when you really break it down.
Yeah. I love it.
It is.
I love it so much.
Just keep going.
Basha, we should just go have dinner after this and talk more about it.
We should. I would love to. Josh never calls
so
me or
good.
wants to hang out with me or anything, so it's
Confirmed.
He's so elusive. He really...
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, no, that's 100% correct.
All right, I will wrap up. Maybe we'll have you back on, Basha, to continue talking about this. But I'll wrap up with the quote of the day. Golf is a game of inches. The most important are the 6 inches between your ears. Arnold Palmer. Please remember to rate and subscribe. Follow us at ActTwoWriters for more awesome writing stuff. You can follow me, Tasha, at Story Thursday on Instagram, or on Twitter at Tasha 3.0.
I'm Joshua Hallman on Twitter, Josh Hallman on Instagram. Man of mystery, are you there?
I am. I'm here.
On the socials?
I am not really on the socials, so you can't really find me anywhere. You could send psychic messages to the ether, and I might pick up on them.
I'm sorry to say this, but Basha has a podcast.
I do.
That we didn't even discuss. And him and his friend review movies without the other one has
You
not
are
seen.
as bad at
Not
us
review.
at advertising yourself.
This is my skill. This is why I love my manager, because he's so good at this, and I'm just not good at this area. But yes, we do have a podcast, which is where one of us has seen a movie and the other hasn't, and then we both rate the film at the end. But we sort of, it's very unique in that we're both sort of reformed academics. My co-host has 4 master's degrees, and so we just kind of approach it from a very academic angle. But it's fun. Mostly it's just us talking trash about movies we don't like.
And the podcast name is...
Haven't seen it.
Amazing. Go check it out. And as always, the Act 2 podcast is a production of Act 2, a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This episode was edited by Paul Lundquist.